Hello guys, and welcome back to Joe's Ventures, and today we're doing another episode of our Planet Zoo mod spotlight. So I've got like 5 more of these to pump out before the next update, so I'm really excited to get stuck into this one. So we've got some really interesting additions today. We've got lots of something, as you can see back here, something that seems a little fishy, you could say. So we're going to get started with the things that are not quite so fishy. So we're going to be starting with the lesser capybara. So very similar to the greater capybara. These guys are a large semi-aquatic rodent in the same family, obviously. They're very closely related to the capybara in the same genus. These guys come from eastern Panama, northwestern Colombia, and western Venezuela. So they were described as a species in 1912, but were demoted to a subspecies of the regular capybara. Though in the mid-1980s, anatomy and genetics did suggest that these guys were a separate species, and are now pretty much considered a species because of their distinctness. So they have a much smaller range, as I mentioned, than the greater capybara. So they're really only found around the top from that little bit of from Colombia and Venezuela. That's where they're found, and they're very similar in appearance to the capybara. They're just mainly slightly smaller. These guys typically weigh about 28 kilos on average, while the greater capybara can weigh up to 35 kilos and often more. So these guys also breed year-round with an average litter of about 3.5. As you can see here, they're very, very cute. They're not quite as well known. Look at this cutie swimming. So these may be diurnal, nocturnal, or solitary or social, depending on season, habitat, and hunting pressure. So if they are normally diurnal, there's a lot of humans around that tend to come out at night instead. This species is also pretty common in Panama, but rare in Venezuela, and is threatened by subsistence hunting and destruction of the forest and swamp drainages that they live. So these guys are subject to hunting and habitat destruction. So that's specifically what's happening on the Maldara River, which is a big stronghold for these guys. But overall, they seem to be... We don't really have enough information on these guys to see how well they're doing, so they're considered data deficient. But I still think they're a cool bunch of animals. Really, this was done by Arowana, so a really, really good mod. That's bad. So now let's move on to the next animal. We have got by Genora Pizza, we have got the Barbary Macaque. So the Barbary Macaque is also known as the Barbary Ape, because macaques are kind of not really apes. They're not apes per se, but they haven't got that much of a tail. So these guys are native to the Atlas Mountains of Algeria and Morocco, though there's a small introduced population in Gibraltar, which is about 300 or so. These guys are really interesting because males play an atypical role. It's usually the males are the ones that raise the infants, and all sexes and ages will contribute in care of the young. So they have a very different social system compared to other macaques. Have a look, another one moving about. Really wonderful guy. So these guys have a mean body length of about 556.8 millimeters in females and 634 millimeters in males. And they weigh between 9 to 10 kilograms in females and 14 to 17 kilograms in males. So these guys, as I mentioned, live in the Atlas and Reef Mountains in the Morocco and Algeria. They live in a variety of habitats such as cedar, fern, oak, forest, and grasslands, along with scrub and rocky ridges with vegetation. So they clearly are very versatile with the habitats they live in. And they look wonderful. So these guys are very gregarious. They live in groups of up to about 100. 10 to 100 individuals is usually by range, and they're matriarchal. So that means the hierarchy is determined by lineage from the highest ranking oldest female. So the lead female is usually the one from descended, so it's kind of like matriarchal. So that's pretty cool. And what's really weird is that the males, as I mentioned, will partake in rearing the young. And they often been seen playing and grooming with the infants, and this may have been a result of selectivity based on the females, like wanting good fathers, and they may prefer them. So that's maybe some example of sexual selection. So that's pretty cool. And they climb there. Wonderful boy. So the mating season for these guys runs from November through March. The gestation period is 147 to 192 days, with females usually having one offspring per pregnancy. The females can rear twins in rare instances, and offspring reach maturity about 3 to 4 years old that may live up to 20 years. So that's pretty cool. So these guys eat pretty much whatever they can. They eat a mixture of plants and insect prey. They consume a large amount of all sorts of things. They'll also eat flowers, fruits, seedlings, buds, gums, roots, corns, things like that. Just really whatever they can get their mouths in. And also common prey that these guys will eat are snails, earthworms, scorpions, spiders, centipedes, millipedes, grasshoppers, water striders, scale insects, beetles, butterflies, moths, ants, and tadpoles. And they have been known to cause damage in trees if they're not managed properly. Like the Atlas cedar in Morocco. So that's an example. Since deforestation, these guys, a big issue for these guys with deforestation is there's not enough habitat for these guys, so they're now trying to clear bark and stuff, so that since there's not enough food to go around for the population, so that's been a big thing, a risk for them. We'll have a look at the baby. He's a funny looking cutie. So these guys are main predators. Are leopards, eagles, crowned eagles, and domestic dogs, so that's the main thing. And they are considered endangered. They suffered a major decline because of deforestation and degradation of their habitats, and also poaching for the illegal pet trade. So there's only estimated to be, there was estimated 12,000 to 21,000 macaques left in Morocco and Algeria now, with a small population, about 300, living in Gibraltar. And they actually have believed to have gone extinct about the Iberian Peninsula. They lived in the Pleistocene. They lived from Italy, Hungary, Spain, but then they went extinct from the Iberian Peninsula about 30,000 years ago, and then they were reintroduced. So it's technically like almost accidental Pleistocene rewilding, which is pretty cool to think about. So these guys have kind of become like a really big thing for tourism, and have been used to... a lot of the mistaken ideas of human anatomy was used to be looking at these guys and learning about them. So there's still a lot to learn about these guys. So these guys are really cool. Really nice animals. Good job. Barbary macaques are a good lot. So let's move on to the next animal. So we've got the cute macaque. So let's move on to this one. Was also done by Arowana. We've got two by Arowana, but we'll wait. We have got the European badger, and I love this one. A really, really cool animal. So, also known as just the Eurasian badger, or just a badger, is as a mustelid. So that includes like badgers, wolverines, minks, weasels, things like that. So they live over almost all of Europe and some parts of Western Asia, and are considered least concerned by the IUCN. They have a wide range. And there are several subspecies, with the dominant subspecies predominantly in most of Europe. There's a couple subspecies, but the most common one is this one that you see here, the European badger. So these guys are very, very powerful built animals with black and white and brown grey fur, with a small head and a stocky body with small eyes and a short tail with these black eyes here. It looks wonderful. So they range between 7 to 13 kilos, and in spring can bulk up to 15 to 17 kilos in autumn, and before they sleep in the winter. They are nocturnal and is a social burrowing animal that sleeps during the day and in one of its several sets, so it's kind of like its own burrows, around its territorial range. So these burrows can have multiple chambers and entrances, and are an extensive system of underground passages that can be 35 to 81 meters in length, and these can be home to several badger families and they use them for decades, so it's a lot of really cool communal housing. Badgers are always fussy over the cleanliness of their burrows, which is really cute, and they carry in fresh bedding and remove soiled material, and they defecate in latrines, statistically situated outside the sets en route to other sets. So these guys are also carnivores, and they'll feed on they will feed on a bunch of plant and animal foods, feeding on things like earthworms, large insects, cereals, small mammals, carrion, and tubers, and litters of up to 5 cubs are produced in the spring, with the young are weaned a few months later and are usually remain within the family group. These guys have also been known to share burrows, so this is kind of similar to if you think about aardvarks and pangolins and warthogs in Africa. They'll share their burrows with animals like rabbits, red foxes, and raccoon dogs. but can be ferocious when provoked. And they've been a trait that has been exploited in the non-illegal blood sport of badger baiting. So that's a big issue for these guys. Luckily, they're considered least concern, so they're not at danger of becoming extinct anytime soon. But badger baiting is a very, very controversial sport that's now illegal, so that's very good. So they also can carry bovine tuberculosis, which also affects cattle. And in England, culling of badger populations is used to attempt to reduce the number of incidents of bovine tuberculosis in cattle, even though the efficiency of this is highly disputed. And badger culls are widely considered cruel and inhumane, which is good. So there's a lot of animals that can spread tuberculosis in New Zealand. There's a big issue with possums, and they're an introduced species, so we're trying to get rid of them. So the thing is, in a lot of areas, these animals can spread bovine tuberculosis, and they're native to their range, so they should be protected. But they are a wonderful, wonderful animal. I like this guy. Really, really cool. Too bad they didn't have any babies, but I think we just have a look. Arowana makes some of the nicest mods. I'd love to see this badger. Really cool. So now we're going to move on to the next animal. We have got the Ngali. So we can see a baby one here. Have a look. They're also known as the blue cow. And they're in their own genus. They are from India. Let me find the male. And they can get enormous. The Ngali stands about 1 to 1.5 meters at the shoulder, and males can weigh between 109 and 288 kilograms, while the lighter females weigh between 100 and 123 kilograms. These are a sturdy, like thin-legged antelope with these very characteristic. I want to see if he stands up. They've got this like very long legs. They're almost like a bulky okapi, like a really thin head, but they've got a really thick neck, thick shoulders, and they have a deep sloping back with a white patch on their throat. I really want to see this guy comes. And you can see they have pretty extreme sexual dimorphism. You can see this is a female. This is a female Ngali. Doesn't look too different from other types of deer. And you can see the difference. The male has like a bluish, greyish colour to it. And they also possess horns. Males can have horns up to 15 to 24 centimetres long, as you can see here. We'll see if he gets up. So these Ngali are diurnal. That means they're mainly active during the day. And they band together in 3 different kinds of groups. There can be young 1 or 2 females with calves, 3 to 6 adults with yearling females with calves, and all male groups from 2 to 18 members. So typically tame, the Ngali may appear timid and cautious, but if harassed and alarmed, it can flee up to 300 meters or even 700 meters, galloping away from the source of danger. So these guys, like other ungulates, these guys are herbivores, so they prefer grasses and herbs. They do commonly eat woody plants and dry tropical forests in India, so pretty generalist. Females become sexually mature at about 2 years old, and while males do not become sexually active about 4 or 5 years old because of competition. So you can see what I mean here. Look at this thick neck. Wonderful animal. Love Ngali. So by that time of the year where mating takes place varies geographically, but the peak breeding season lasts 3 to 4 months and can be observed in most places. Gestation for these guys lasts about 8 to 9 months, similar to humans, followed by a single calf, and sometimes twins or even triplets are born. A typical of several bovid species, Ngali calves stay hidden for the first few weeks of their lives, and the lifespan is believed to be about 10 years. So the Ngali prefers habitats with soft bushes, short bushes, and scattered trees and scrub forests and grassy plains. They are also common in agricultural land, but rarely in dense forest. Major populations occur around India and Nepal, and they're thought to be extinct in Bangladesh. But the Ngali was introduced into Texas in the 1920s and the 1930s, and of 2008, the feral population in Texas is believed to be nearly 15,000. So that's a lot of an invasive antelope. And you know Texans, they love to go hunt and whatever they can. Texans be like. So luckily these guys are considered least concerned by the IUCN, and they have been associated with Indian culture since 500 BCE, and were hunted in the Mughal Empire from the 16th to 19th century, and are depicted in numerous miniatures. And they're also considered a pest in several North Indian states as they ravage crops and cause considerable damage. And in Bihar, authorities have classified this guy as vermin. But how can you say this is vermin? He's a wonderful boy. Great big animal with the cute babies. How can you hate this big man? Look at that. I love Ngali. Just look at the aura. I'm in awe of the size of this lad. He's got a thick neck. He's like, he doesn't skip trap day and neck day. He never does. Really cool animal. So now we're going to get something a bit fishy. So this is made by Reef. The next three are made by Reef and Zerosvalmont. This is originally Zoo Tycoon models. We have got the Sandbar Shark. So these are a cool species of shark. So the Sandbar Shark is a species of requiem shark native to the Atlantic in the Indo-Pacific. And they're one of the biggest coastal sharks in the world and relates to things like dusky sharks and bull sharks. Females reach sexual maturity about at age of 13 and have an average fork length, which is the tip of the nose, the fork of the tail, of 154 centimeters, while males reach about maturity to about age 12 and average fork length 151, so they're slightly smaller. Females can grow up to 2.5 meters in length and males up to 1.8, and the body color you can see is a bluish to brownish grey to bronze. And while these guys usually swim alone or gather in 6 segregated schools, which vary in size, just depending on the individuals. So as I mentioned, these guys are mostly found around muddy and sandy bottoms along coastal waters such as bays, estuaries, harbours, or at the mouths of rivers. But they also swim... Wait, there's one swimming. I want to get one swimming. There's one. But they can also be found in deeper waters up to 200 meters deep and more into tidal zones. And they're found around tropical and temperate waters worldwide. From the western Atlantic, they range from Massachusetts to Brazil. And juveniles are abundant in the lower Chesapeake Bay and nursery grounds from Delaware Bay to South Carolina. And others include the Florida Keys, Molucca in Turkey, and Macaque Bay. So natural predators of these guys include tiger sharks and great whites, and they self-prey on fresh rays and crabs. These are viviparous of the requiem. They have like a central yolk sac, and as they're born, babies will kind of fight in the mother, and they give birth to about average 8 pups, where they carry for 1 year before giving birth. And these guys can live between 35 and 40 years, so they are quite a long-lived animal, which is pretty cool. So sadly, these guys are, like other sharks, they're often, there are very few attacks from these guys on people, but often people think, oh, shark! And they're considered one of the safest sharks to swim with and keep in aquariums, so that's really cool. But as mentioned, I'm going to mention this probably a lot, shark fin soup is a big issue for these guys. They just chop off the fins and they sink to the bottom of the sea and die, so it really just offers no nutrition value, which sucks. These are wonderful animals. How can you not love them? So we're going to be moving on to another shark, very similar species. There's one swimming. There, look at that. We have got the Blacktip reef shark, which is another requiem shark. These guys can be easily told apart because they got a black tip on their fins. You can see on the caudal fin there. You can see it on the caudal fin and the pectoral fins and all that. Look at that. See those black tips, really looks cool. So they're one of the most abundant sharks in the world and inhabit tropical coastal coral reefs in the Indian and Pacific Ocean, and they prefer shallow inshore waters. And the first sight you see this guy is like this really prominent black tip. And they're usually found over reef ledges and sandy flats that have been known to enter brackish and freshwater environments, an average length of about 1.6 meters long. So the Blacktip reef shark has extremely small home ranges and exhibits strong state fidelity, which they remain within the same location up to several years and are very active predators, but they prey on small fish, crustaceans and cephalopods, but they've also been known to attack seabirds and sea snakes. And accounts of the Blacktip reef shark's life history have been variable, but in part because they have a really wide distribution. But like other members of this family, they are viviparous, with females giving birth to 2 to 5 young in a biennial, annual, or probably biannual circle. So usually between either once a year, one every couple of years, usually. These guys are very slow breeders because they're top predators. So reports of the gestation period range from about 7 to 9 months to 10 to 11 and maybe even 16 months. We really kind of don't know. It can vary a lot during locality, it seems. Mating is preceded by the male following closely behind the female, likely attracted by her chemical signals. And newborn sharks can be found further inshore and in shallower water than adults. And typically roaming in large groups over areas flooded by high tide. So that's pretty cool. Look at these wonderful sharks. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. They're everywhere. So these guys are typically very skittish and timid sharks. They're very difficult to approach and seldom pose a danger to people, luckily. So, however, people wading them in the water are at risk of having their legs bitten by mistake, so you've got to be careful with these guys. These sharks are used for meat, fins, and liver oil, but are not considered a commercially significant species. So, they're considered vulnerable, and even though they are very high, very common still, these guys can be subject to overfishing, obviously not even just for shark fin, but overfishing of their prey populations. And also these guys are also very slow reproducing. Most sharks are very slow reproducing, only reproducing even once every couple of years. So that's why they're considered vulnerable. And hopefully they can recover up a bit more. Very wonderful animal. So now let's move on to another day, another shark. Now we are moving on to the zebra shark. So the zebra shark is a carpet shark, and it's a sole member of its family Stegomosauridae. It is found throughout the tropical Indo-Pacific, frequenting coral reefs and sandy flats at a depth of 62 meters. Adult zebra sharks have this really distinctive spotted appearance, which you think, zebra shark, why does it look like that? But its name actually comes from the juveniles, which we don't really have juveniles here. They are properly modeled, but the juveniles tend to have these 5 long ridges that go down their body, and as they grow up, they get this spotted pattern. So they also have these really, really long caudal fins, which shows that they live near the bottom. And young zebra sharks can get to about under 50 to 90 centimeters long and have a completely different pattern as they have these vertical stripes, while these guys have all these spots down their body. And this species, as the adults, can get to about 2.5 meters in length, or about 8 feet long. So these guys are nocturnal, and they spend most of the day resting motionless on the seafloor. At night, they actively hunt for mollusks, crustaceans, small bony fish, and possibly sea snakes inside crevices and in the reefs. And though they're solitary for most of the year, they do form large seasonal aggregations, and these guys are ovoviviparous, which means females produce dozens of egg capsules, which they anchor to underwater structures with tendrils. And these guys are pretty hardy in captivity and kept in public aquariums across the world, and popular subjects of ecotourism because they're not that aggressive. And they're an endangered species and are taken by commercial fisheries across most of their range, except Australia, for meat, fins, and liver oil, and there's evidence that their numbers are going down because of this hunting, which is very terrible. And people think a lot is that these guys, sharks need to keep swimming, but these guys can actually actively pump water through their gills, which I think is really cool. A lot of sharks that live very sedentary lives are able to pump water through their gills so they can keep breathing. So I think that's a really cool fact. Wonderful, wonderful animal. Now we're going to move on to the next fish. It's the second to last fishy. This one was done by... So those 3 were done by Reef and Zebromount. This one is done by Reef, Whalebite, and the Toucan... Corperation, I think it's called. I think that's just the Stokes model. So let's find... These guys are pretty small, but we need to find them. So here we are. This is the Asian Arowana. So these guys are a bit confusing because they are maybe up to 4 species, but often they're just considered monotypic. So, and they can come in all sorts of different colors. So these guys are found all across Southeast Asia and are found in like brackish waters and slow-moving waters through forests and wetlands. And adults will feed on other fish, and juveniles feed on insects. So they can get pretty big. They can get about 90 centimeters long in total length. And they have a much larger caudal fin than the silver arowana from the Amazon, which is pretty cool. And these guys actually reach sexual maturity pretty late, at about 3 or 4 years old, since they're large predators. They will produce a few eggs, 30 to 100, which are quite large, and after they're fertilized, they exhibit great parental care with parental mouth brooding, so they'll let the baby swim in their mouth and brood with them, so that's pretty cute. And both of the fertilized eggs and larvae will brood within the male's mouth, so it's And what's really interesting about these guys is that they're very prolific jumpers, so they'll jump out and catch other fish, or even catch like mice and small birds. They're really prolific in that way. And they are very, very common in the pet trade as like well, they're not common as in there's not a lot of them, but they're very common like sought out fish, because there's sort of a satyr symbol. They kind of resemble, their scales look like the Chinese dragon, and it's a sign of wealth. So that's why they're very common in the pet trade. And that's been a big issue for these guys, along with declining habitats and obviously this breeding. They're luckily bred in captivity mostly, but destruction of their habitats is a big issue for these guys in wild populations. And if you want to keep these guys in captivity, they can be very territorial, so you need a very big tank. And they need a tight-fitting cover to prevent them from escaping, because I've heard lots of stories of people getting Arowana, and they jump out the tank and they drown, and they die because they can't breathe on the floor. And they need to be maintained at temperatures of about 24 to 30 degrees water. And they're carnivorous and need to feed on things in the wild, and even in captivity you should feed them things like shrimp, crickets, mealworms, shrimps, feeder fish, small frogs, earthworms. They pretty much eat whatever they can. But also you can have pellets and things, even fed koi sometimes, as an attempt to try and make them more colourful. But sometimes I don't think that really works. So luckily there's a lot of farms that breed Arowana, and they can go for very expensive. I remember seeing one personally just for up to $5,000. It was a super red. And they can, the trade for these guys makes a lot of money. It makes $2 million US dollars globally. So that's how much they make. So there's high demand for this fish. And they're mostly prohibited in places like Florida and New Mexico, but I think they're still a wonderful animal as they are. Pretty cool. So now we're going to have a look at the lucky last animal. So we're going to have a look at, this one was done by Reef and Zoker. So most of these originally for Zoo Tycoon 2. But now we're going to have a look at this one. This one's pretty cool. We've got a baby. Cute. We'll have a look at those soon. This is the Arapaima. So there was believed to be only one species of Arapaima, Arapaima Gigas, but they actually had been split. And these guys are the largest freshwater fish you can get. So they can usually get between 2 meters, and they average around 2 meters and 2.6 meters and over 100 kilos. The maximum recorded weight for these guys was 200 kilos, and the longest being 3 meters long. But there have been anecdotal reports of ones over 4.5 meters long, but obviously we don't really know. And as a result of overfishing, these big ones are obviously uncommon in the wild. So they have this really cool torpedo shape and these cool red markings that really make them cool. And these guys, as a diet, they commonly feed on fish, crustaceans, fruit, seeds, pretty much anything, and even small land animals that they can catch. So they're pretty generalist in that way. And they're also an air breather, so what they can do is they can go up to the surface, because sometimes fresh water and the waters they live in cannot be that oxygen rich, so they can go and take air into their mouths, and they can almost have like a pseudo lung that they can dissolve oxygen into their bodies, and that's why they can live in places like oxbow lakes and areas with low oxygen. So they're very generalist, and they can be top predators in these ecosystems. So that's really cool. So their life cycles are greatly affected by flooding in the wild, and during the months with like lots of flooding, where water levels are low, they tend to lay their eggs during those months, and they can build a nest up to 50 centimeters wide and 15 deep, usually in muddy bottom areas. And when the water rises, the egg hatch, and the offspring have the flood season from May to August, which to prosper, which such as yearly spawnings can be regulated seasonally. So that's pretty cool. They're also a mouth brooder, similar to the Asian Arowana. So the young are protected within the male's mouth until they get older, and the female Arapaima helps protect the male and young by circling and fending off potential predators. So that's really cool. So these guys are also exploited by many ways by people. They are often hunted for food, of course, and you can get as much as 70 kilos of fish from these guys. And they have been kind of bred in aquaculture, but they're not really doing that well. But as I mentioned, they have been extirpated from a lot of their range, and a lot of them are a lot smaller, but they need to be. But they are growing in numbers, luckily. They're doing okay-ish, but I don't think there has been really official ratings. They considered data deficient, so that means we don't really have enough information to strongly judge how good they are doing. But yeah, these guys are at least not doing too bad. They're not extremely endangered. They just need some proper conservation work to take care of them. Wonderful animal. Let's have a look at the baby. Look at this baby. Look at this cutie. Wonderful. So yeah, I think this would be a good place to end the video. So let's pop out and talk about it. So yeah, I really hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you guys like and subscribe. What you should do, though, before I say all that, is I've got like 4 more parts to do after this, so they're going to be coming out up until the update, so make sure you stay tuned. And if you want to make sure, you need to make sure you get notified and subscribe so you can catch up on that, because I got lots of these to do, and it's going to be awesome. Next episodes are going to be real fun. So yeah, I really hope you guys like this video. If you guys like and subscribe, and bye-bye.